All right. Thank you, Benji, so much for that really kind introduction. Hope you guys liked our hype video. My name is Andrew.
I'm also Andrew.
And we're the co-founders of HairDAO. So let me start by sharing my screen. Can you guys see that? Okay. So HairDAO, a network state solving hair loss. To start, let's focus on our large inpatient patient community, the section we also call Why HairDAO. So Andrew and I have actually known each other since high school, where he was the unfortunate sufferer of diffuse thinning. Unfortunately, me and the other kids in high school were cruel, and we took to calling him Patches, which I found really funny. That is until the next year, my first year at college, when I started waking up with clumps of hair on my pillow. It was at that point that I realized how profound hair loss could be. Not only do things happen, as simple as girls liking you less or something kind of funny like that, but it's also more profound where for me, it was really the first time I came face to face with my own aging and my own mortality. And that was a really scary feeling. So I think, as you can see in some of the screenshots we pulled here, most of our community members feel the same. I think people are very quick to brush off hair loss as a trivial cosmetic issue. But it's really deeper than that for many. Knowing what a profound and stress-inducing experience hair loss can be, Andrew and I decided to start HairDAO. The idea was to foster a community of like-minded individuals, those that were unhappy with their present situation and willing to do something to change it. I think HairDAO has an important role to play because when you look at hair loss in particular, there are three main challenges that the community faces. One, lack of innovation. Two, lack of public investment. And three, a lack of private investment. We'll dig in a bit more to those points in a second, but for now, let's go to the next slide. Regardless of the challenges I just mentioned, the hair loss community is resilient. If you close one door, we'll open another. As a replacement for the total lack of traditional researchers, hair loss has developed one of the largest, most dedicated, most sophisticated online communities. That includes people analyzing the literature to find new gene targets, but it also actually includes people testing new non-FDA approved treatments on themselves. There's a really intense biohacker community in hair loss that I think often goes underappreciated or unnoticed. But I think it shows, honestly, the passion and the desire people have to cure this condition. Now onto the dismal state of modern hair loss research. This section will kind of dig more into the three main challenges that the hair loss community faces. So the first is just the current solutions are terrible. We have minoxidil discovered by accident in the 1950s while it was being used to cure hypertension. It's just really not very effective for most, despite what you might see in various marketing campaigns. Then you have finasteride discovered also by accident while it was being used to treat enlarged prostates in the 1970s. The side effects, it's a little bit more effective than minoxidil. The side effects are so bad, they actually have their own name, post-finasteride syndrome. So that should tell you all you need to know. That's a big risk just to take for your hair loss. People risk things like infertility. And then finally, you have hair transplants, which I actually got one because I was a candidate because I had primarily recession sort of on my temples. Backs as a diffuse thinner, not even a candidate. You lose density within 4 years, which I'm experiencing now. And they're also just really expensive. So not accessible to the overwhelming majority of the hair loss community. The next challenge that we suffer from, and I think it's the most interesting and most relevant for HairDAO, is that because the NIH, who funds the overwhelming amount of early stage biomedical research in general, has decided to classify androgenic alopecia as a cosmetic condition, because they've decided to classify it as a cosmetic condition, effectively nobody funds it. And I think I like to quote Dr. Ralph Paus, we work with here all the time, on this topic. And he says, if you suffer from something, it's the disease. And so who is the NIH to tell this massive online community who's clearly deeply affected by their hair loss, what is and isn't a disease? I think the last thing to touch on here is that the hair loss is represented by the National Institute of Arthritis and Musculoskeletal and Skin Diseases. I think you could imagine how capital allocation goes when an arthritis specialist is trying to allocate capital to early stage hair loss research. It's just not very efficient. Then we have the private market capital flows to just touch on here. You have 61% of the current market is hair transplants. The market in total is $7 billion, which I think says something, given how bad the current solution set is, that the market's that big. People are willing to pay even for bad solutions. The thing that sticks out most with me here is that the distributors like Keeps, Hims, Row, they spend about 110 to 120% of their revenue on marketing, while spending 0% on R&D, which would actually benefit their market and their customers. But unfortunately, innovation is not the most short-term profitable business model, although we believe it's the most value accretive long-term. And so they've opted to really not spend any of their quite meaningful profits on R&D. The result of all of this is that we just have a really bleak startup landscape. There's no real companies to hold your breath for in the space. And that's where we come in, HairDAO. So with that, I'll turn it over to Baxt.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So if the first half is why HairDAO, then the second half is how HairDAO. Yeah, so our primary mission obviously is to solve hair loss. And there are really two ways we think we can do it simultaneously if we do it correctly. So the first is to empower both traditional and internet native researchers to discover new targets and ultimately new treatments. And the second is to grow the pool of researchers. So if we can convert more patients into researchers by providing patients tools to become researchers, and not everyone will become essentially a self-taught biologist, but even through just providing data and helpful information for the DAO, we think we can essentially grow the number of hair loss researchers significantly. And so the result, if we're successful, is a decentralized, vertically integrated pharma company that we think will be orders of magnitude more efficient than the current system. Looking at the current system today, fundamentally, there are two parties we really care about. They're the creators who create early stage IP, and then they're the patients who consume it. And then in between is a bunch of middlemen who take very high fees and really drive the patient and the researcher extremely far apart. So the first is universities are also tech transfer offices, and that's where research is created. And then the best research made at universities will be published in the best journals. The best published research will then advance to clinical trials. And then from there, the best drugs will advance to distribution, and ultimately to the patient. Our job is to push the cost of all these middlemen to zero. This slide provides some more detail on how we're going to do that, but you can just read that later if you'd like. Sorry, next slide. So what we view our goal is to essentially remove all these middlemen. So instead of patients, researchers, hundreds of middlemen in between, we think it can just be patients, researchers, HairDAO, except we're not even separating the patient and the researcher because they're actually both a part of HairDAO. So there are really no middlemen. It's a very circular economy that we think we've already demonstrated can be self-sustaining and ultimately lead to significantly more efficient, better research than what's going on in the current system, which isn't really a low bar, but we think we can improve it by orders of magnitude and meet a high bar. So what have we done so far to disrupt these people? So the first one, we execute our first IP NFT. The number one critique we get as a DeSci DAO is, oh, you're just going to get the worst deal flow because you're going to get the people that can't get funding from traditional people. But no one wants to fund early stage hair loss research. So we think we actually have a really good piece of IP here, but we'll find out over the coming months just how good it really is. We also have really strong community growth, over 1,200 Discord and Twitter members. If you look at our Discord community as well, I think you'll find that our engagement per user is extremely high. In tandem with that, we've grown a really strong media arm through our own podcast with Ralph as a co-host, and then also through essentially a monthly overview of the research and operations of the DAO, which our community of active participants both creates with us and we think really enjoys. And then lastly, in tandem with all those three, is we think probably the best hair loss deal flow in the world. Between what we get from the traditional world and what we get from our community, we don't think anyone else has the same level of what's going on in the space as what we do. And so when we're thinking about products, we really separate into two buckets. There's R&D and then there's tools. So just going through some of the R&D highlights just really quickly. So we have the study with Ralph that we funded. We have one more study with Ralph listed here, but we actually have two more that aren't listed here that Ralph's proposed. Then we have some of the best equity deals. So Samson Therapeutics is the most well-funded or one of the most well-funded US hair loss startups. And then lastly is an example of a community-generated idea by an anon on our Discord. And then on the tooling side, so we spent a lot of time on the patient portal so far. The goal of the patient portal is to give hair loss patients anywhere with internet access the ability to contribute to HairDAO and without providing capital, so far just by providing data. And with that data allowing us to generate new research targets, place them in clinical trials, and ultimately, as we build a big enough data set, recommend treatments of what's currently offered today. We also have haircuts, what we've talked about before, some more media, and then we're right now currently building a research portal and in some early discussions about some other things we want to launch. Yeah, and so with the pipeline and the roadmap going forward, we really think about this flywheel on the right really all the time. It might sound like we have 4 separate businesses, but really all of them are to just continue to grow this flywheel. We think the faster we grow this flywheel, the faster we form a big enough moat where we win. So as our IP portfolio improves, we'll attract more members. From those members, maybe 5% are really strong early stage researchers. That will enable us to generate new targets, analyze old targets and IP better, develop an even better IP portfolio, which will attract more members, et cetera. Really all the tools, all the media, everything we do is to try to grow this flywheel, to try to empower each person that's participating in it, and ultimately to own the best hair loss IP in the world. Yeah, so that's HairDAO. We want you to join the HairForce.
Yes, we'd love you to join the HairForce. The easiest way to join our mission, hop in the community and be a part of the conversation would be to get into our Discord. If you'd like to buy the hair token, you can do so on Uniswap. And then if you're interested in a larger OTC transaction, the easiest way to do that, which we are open for now officially, the easiest way to do that would be to hop in our Discord and message me at averbs123 or Baxt at Andy1, or you could just DM us on Twitter or something like that. Yeah, with that said, thank you so much for listening to our presentation. Look forward to seeing you in our Discord Q&A after this. And Benji, with that, sending it back to Benji.